Dennis Hallman's infamous UFC 133 outfit. At UFC 133, Dennis Hallman walked to the octagon wearing something that made everyone stop and stare: bright blue Speedo-style trunks. The story goes it was the result of a lost bet, but the joke didn't land with anyone, least of all UFC president Dana White. It was an awkward scene. Two fighters inside the cage, one in tiny swimwear and the other sporting a giant arrow shaved into his chest hair. Dana made it crystal clear afterwards, that kind of look would never be allowed again. Fans roasted it online, fighters were baffled, and the UFC came off looking unprofessional. Hallman was finished in the first round, and Dana was so eager to end the spectacle that he handed Brian Ebersol a $70,000 thank you bonus for getting it over with. Hallman's contract was never renewed, and the UFC officially banned Speedo-style shorts. Today, type his name in Google and that infamous image still overshadows his entire career. GSP's Vaseline controversy. UFC 94. In the highly anticipated champion versus champion showdown at UFC 94, Georges St-Pierre defended his welterweight title against lightweight champ BJ Penn. But the fight became less famous for the action and more for what happened in between rounds. Cameras caught GSP's cornerman applying Vaseline to his face, which was fine, but then rubbing it on his shoulders and back. In MMA, that's a major violation because it makes a fighter more slippery and harder to control on the ground. Penn's corner accused GSP of greasing to gain an unfair edge, claiming it prevented BJ from locking in submissions. Dana White even voiced support for Penn's frustration, and the Nevada State Athletic Commission launched an investigation. While the results stood, rules were tightened. Only official cutmen could apply Vaseline, and they'd be closely watched from then on. The birth of the 12-6 elbow ban. The infamous 12-6 elbow rule traces back to MMA's early days. When athletic commissions were deciding what strikes to outlaw, they saw a martial arts demo where a practitioner smashed bricks with a straight-down elbow. The motion you'd see on a clock from 12 to 6. Doctors and regulators decided it looked too dangerous, so they banned it outright. Referee Big John McCarthy later revealed that a fight between 6'10" Gon McGee and the much smaller Brad Gabriel also played a role. McGee rained down vertical elbows, and a ringside doctor insisted it was too brutal to allow. McCarthy pushed to ban only that motion, preserving other elbow strikes. The result? Sideways, spinning, and even upward elbows stayed legal. But that single downward angle could cost you a fight. Just ask John Jones, whose only career loss came from a 12-6 DQ in 2009. In 2024, the unified rules were updated to lift the ban, though not every state has followed suit yet. Tank Abbott nearly ejects an opponent. Back in the chaotic anything goes era, Tank Abbott was the UFC's ultimate brawler. At UFC 11, facing Cal Worsham, Tank dropped him with heavy shots, and then tried to throw him completely out of the cage. Worsham's upper body went over the top, and only the padded fence saved him from hitting the floor outside. No rule even existed for that situation, because no one thought a fighter would actually try it. Afterwards, the UFC made it explicit: no throwing or pushing opponents out of the octagon. It was a necessary fix for a sport trying to appear more professional. The shorts-grabbing debacle of 1998. In the first ever UFC welterweight title fight, Pat Miletich met Mikey Burnett in what turned into a bizarre tug-of-war. Instead of clean striking or grappling, the match was full of constant shorts-grabbing from both men. At one point, referee Big John McCarthy had to halt the fight just to fix Burnett's waistband. The slow pace and messy clinches made for one of the least entertaining title fights ever. The UFC immediately banned shorts grabbing. Today, it can get you warned, penalized, or even disqualified. Fun side note, Miletich's shorts that night were the first in UFC history to display a tap-out logo, and years later, they sold on eBay for over $1,500, stretched out waistband and all. When TKOs became part of MMA. In the very first UFC events, referees weren't allowed to stop fights. Only knockouts, submissions, or a thrown towel could end a bout. That policy was tested in UFC 1 when Gerard Gordeau knocked out sumo wrestler Tila Tuli with a brutal kick, sending a tooth flying into the crowd. Even though stoppages were banned, the ref intervened. By UFC 2, things got worse. Pat Smith unleashed unanswered punches on Scott Morris while the ref stood by helplessly. Big John McCarthy, new to refereeing, told UFC officials he wouldn't work another event unless refs could protect fighters. By UFC 3, TKOs were officially introduced, giving referees the authority to stop dangerous beatdown. The UFC 5 lay and pray disaster. Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie's rematch was hyped as a historic showdown and turned into 36 minutes of inactivity. Shamrock took Gracie down early and stayed in his guard, barely attacking, while Gracie failed to create openings from the bottom. With no rounds, no time limit, and no stand-up rule, the fight became a marathon stalemate. Fans booed, commentators struggled to fill the silence, and the UFC realized something had to change. Soon after, time limits were added, and referees were given the power to stand fighters up if nothing was happening. The fight that created judges. Even with those changes, UFC 7 brought another problem. Shamrock faced Oleg Taktarov in a cautious, slow-paced bout that went the distance. With no judges in place, the fight ended in a frustrating draw. The UFC decided enough was enough. UFC 8 introduced official judges and scorecards, along with a standard 15-minute fight limit, ensuring that bouts had definitive outcomes. Ironically, many fights on that UFC 8 card went to decision, proving just how necessary the change was. Tito Ortiz and the light heavyweight division. In the late 90s, Tito Ortiz was the UFC's golden boy. But he fought in a division then called middleweight, capped at 200 pounds. Cutting to that weight was taking a toll on him. When the unified rules came in 2001, the UFC saw an opportunity. They raised the limit to 205 pounds and renamed it light heavyweight, creating a perfect division for Ortiz. At the same time, they introduced a new middleweight class at 185 pounds. Tito thrived as the face of the division, later claiming, with some truth, that it was made for him. The change also aligned UFC weight classes with boxing and other combat sports, making the system more consistent. The Dr. Check Restart controversy. At UFC 42, Dwayne Ludwig was on his back, taking heavy shots, when Big John McCarthy paused the fight for a doctor to examine a cut. Once cleared, the fight was inexplicably restarted standing up, erasing the dominant position of Ludwig's opponent. Ludwig went on to win a close decision, but many, including Dana White, called the restart unfair. That incident led to a rules update. After any pause for medical checks or equipment issues, fights must resume from the exact same position they were in before the stoppage.